Hi, this is Jeanette from Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio, and you are listening to Two Broads Talking Politics.
Are you listening?
Hey everyone, this is Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics. I'm here as usual with my co-host Sophie. Hey Sophie.
Hey Kelly.
And tonight we are super thrilled to be joined by Bryce Tache. Hi Bryce.
Hi Kelly. Hi Sophie. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So Bryce is an activist and he has been doing something for the past, I believe, 46 days. That's called Stand on Every Corner.
That's right.
It's now called Stand on Every Corner. So we want to talk to Bryce about that. But first, Bryce, maybe you could tell us a little bit about sort of who you are and how you got involved in activism.
Yeah, sure. And thank you for having me tonight. I'm be able to chat with you and learn from you. And until recently, probably like many of your guests, I'd never considered myself a political activist. This is all really new to me. I think I read that part of what you were looking to do with your podcast was you were just looking to do more to be able to amplify other voices and to get more involved in your community. And that's exactly what drove me to creating this Stand on Every Corner movement as well. Before that, though, I was involved in my community. I know all my neighbors. I live in South Minneapolis. I have 2 kids, and so I'm really actively involved in their school and with our neighbors. But we didn't really talk about politics, and that's what's really changed. I think the Stand on Every Corner movement is it's not all about politics. It's certainly not about left versus right, but it is how do we all stand up against policies that we believe are harmful, regardless of our own political affiliations.
Okay, and so let's talk just a little bit about what this is. And you are very active on Twitter, and that's how I've come to know you, and also seems to be how this movement has spread. But could you talk about what exactly is this? What are you doing, and how did it start?
Sure. So in June, I was on a business trip in Barcelona, which was amazing. I'd never been there before. It was just an amazing trip. And I was able to talk with a lot of people that live there. And so many people were talking to me about why are Americans not in the streets every day? And I heard so many comparisons between Trump and Franco and talked with people who really knew what it was like to live under a military dictator. And they really suggested that I should be more worried, that we all should be more worried than we seemed to be. And, my argument kind of back to them was, I do see some risks that we might be slipping into some kind of, authoritarian state. I was especially around, how Trump was, attacking the press and calling them the enemy. The whole separation of families was just beginning to happen in June as well. And people in Spain were just, you're already a few stages farther than you think you are. And that really scared me. I thought I was a little bit more politically aware than I thought I was, but it really made me rethink and open my eyes. I was calling reps every day before that. I was hosting neighborhood meetings. I was amplifying candidate voices, especially progressive candidates. I was attending, like many of us, the big protests that might happen every few months. And so on the plane back, I was thinking, how could I take the feeling I get when I would go to protests, whether it was, the Women's March or around, gun reform or March for Science. I always would leave those feeling, inspired. I felt like a lot of, solidarity with people that I didn't really know. And I always just felt really hopeful. And I was thinking, how could I replicate that in a hyper local way and on a daily basis in my own neighborhood? And so that's where, even though it didn't have the name Stand on Every Corner at that point, the day after we got back from Spain, we just grabbed some posters and some markers and we went to a park, just very short walk from our house, and decided we're going to be out here every night until Election Day. And we mostly focused at that time around family separation issue, which was to me just like the final straw. But I also encouraged people to come on Twitter and really just share their voice, whatever mattered to them, whatever they cared about, to be able to come out and talk about that with us. I think our first night was June 21st. It was a really small group. I think there were maybe 5 of us. And some days that first week, it was just my husband and I, or my kids and I. And then slowly over time, more and more people started to come. And exactly what I was hoping for. We were starting to make connections with people in our community. We had local representatives come in. We began to register voters. And for me, every single day, it's just an hour, 6 to 7 p.m. in the park, but when I would come home afterward, I would just feel like I was doing something more. And it just kind of is rejuvenating to me.
What sort of response were you getting in person? So you said that you were registering voters. Were people who were driving by noticing? Were people walking? You were in a park, right? So are there people walking through the park? How were they reacting to it?
Yeah, so in South Minneapolis is a very rural area. Keith Ellison is our representative here. And so a lot of the people that we interact with, whether they're driving by or whether they're walking through the park, are extremely supportive. So, people driving by will also often give us, honks or thumbs ups or cheers. I would say maybe 1 to 2% of our interactions are negative. And I think that's just in part because of the politics of many of our neighbors here. I will say that as this movement is beginning to grow across the country, I think there's 45 of these now happening on a daily basis. And certainly some people that are in more conservative areas, receive more negative than we do. That we have these going on in the suburbs of Chicago. I think there's 4 in Florida. They're in Michigan. They're in Ohio. So I really, really credit the people that are doing these where they might have more difficult sessions, but even they have talked about how when they're talking with independents, when they're talking with Republicans, that it's still, this dialogue can take place. And it is harder to scream at each other when you're face to face. It might be a little bit easier to do that, on Twitter, and maybe a bit easier to actually have a meaningful exchange of ideas when you're, sitting at a park bench.
Since you said that these protests have spread, sort of how did that happen? Do you guys have a website? Did it spread mostly over Twitter?
We don't have a website yet. We will have one within the week. So it did mostly spread on Twitter, which is the social media I use most often. Some people who started to come to ours here would also just spread, in their church bulletins or on, some other local community apps. So had, a couple of write-ups in both the local paper and in the city paper, and that really helped us get more attention here. I think there's 6 now in Minneapolis, so the city's area. And then once they started to spread here, it really caught on. There's this amazing friend of Salt Lake City named Ed, and really been promoting it. And then we also have a Twitter friend of ours named Melissa, who's in Australia, who continuously, captures how many of these are happening and where and when, and pushes that out. So it's been very grassroots and very small. But our hope is that once we get the website up and running, people will be able to, click on a map, find if there's a local protest near them, and if not, kind of claim a corner. Because the whole idea of this is that it should be really, really easy. You don't have to drive anywhere. You don't have to take public transportation. You can do it literally on your own corner. And although the park we go to has quite a bit of traffic, it's not mandatory either. Even if you only talk with a couple people in your own neighborhood when you're out there, I think it's meaningful. And we wanted it to truly be easy for folks to do something to get them off their Twitter feeds or off of Facebook and actually interacting with friends and neighbors and other people in their communities.
And you had at yours at least one previous recent guest of ours, Kirsten Kennedy, who's running for Congress in Minnesota. And I know that Jenny Wilson, who's running for Senate in Utah, has gone to the Salt Lake City one.
It's really been amazing. When Kirsten came, it was pouring rain. I actually sent everyone home that night because I was worried that there was lightning, and Kristen, it was a bit of a commute for her to come. And when she was here, she was like, "I'm going to do this if you're going to do it." So it was just there were 4 of us standing under umbrellas. Our signs were just disintegrating in the rain, and we stood out there for an hour. For me, we are doing this daily. The only times I haven't done it in the past 46 days, I did have a business trip to Boston, so I protested there instead. And then last week I did take a few vacation days, and everyone else who has been, coming, kind of held down the fort while I was gone there. But the idea of doing something, I'm doing them daily. Some of the others in other parts of the country are, 3 times a week or five times a week. But it's how do we get this kind of like regular cadence going? And certainly representatives are showing up. We had last night Patricia Torres-Ray, who is one of the, I think she's one of 6 people running for Keith Ellison's House seat here, Minnesota 5. She's come twice. And that was fantastic. We've had our city council person's family show up as well, and we've had some other representatives too. So it's a good way to talk with the people who either are currently representing us or hoping to really understand where they stand on issues, especially immigration reform.
What has been your favorite reaction, if you have one, of somebody who's driving by or walking by or showed up?
Every day I meet someone or someone drives by that just really moves me. And the one instance that moved me the most was, I think about 2 weeks ago, in the back seat of a car was a really, really Hispanic woman. She was probably 85 years old, maybe even older than that. And her windows were rolled up, and she just gave a peace sign to us and smiled just the smallest smile. And it really kind of drove home to me that, I have a certain amount of privilege as a white male, and I need to be out there, fighting for communities that might be under attack or vulnerable to abuses by the Trump administration. And I think that moment in particular just kind of solidified it to me that if I can give someone hope and say, you're not alone, there are others fighting for you and for your community, that's kind of stuck with me. We also do have on the other side, when we do have some people who, shout obscenities at us or give us the finger or shout or some Trump lies, that often happens when people are driving by. So I can't really have a discussion with them, but it really, even that, I try to see the positive that, that there are some people who are so emotionally tied to Trump and his brand and his values. That's good for me to remember as well, because I think, that's what we're fighting. And there's so much, I often talk about the outrage I feel about things that Trump is doing, but there's so much anger on the other side, even directed toward us, demonstrating our First Amendment rights. And that was a kind of a shock to me. It would not occur to me if I saw a group of conservatives, protesting on a corner to tell them to F off, especially if they're under any circumstances, but especially if there were, kids or veterans or other people in that group. And we get that, again, it's a minority, but we do get it every night.
What are the kinds of signs? You said when you first started out, you were focusing on family separation. What are the kinds of signs that you're bringing now?
I'm still focusing on making sure that all the families are reunited, and so are many of the folks who continue to come. So we still have signs, closing the camps. We have signs showing how many children are still not with their parents. We have a lot of signs that, because these are really family events as well, we have people from multiple generations who show up. So we have a lot of signs that are very positive, so that kids can hold them, make America kind again, some just, be kind or be nice. So they kind of run the gamut. Some other people will bring signs that are increasingly around, Russia and treason. And we do have some who will really focus in on some other issues that might be important to them, whether it's education, whether it's the Supreme Court. But I would say probably about 75% of the signs are still focused around immigration, to kind of keep that front and center, right?